Hi, everyone. So, this comic got into the comic book news and actually some mainstream sites about 2 days ago. And it got on there for two reasons. Number one, it has the unique distinction of being canceled at issue number two. Number two was that supposedly this was a problem because this is an all black team, and you shouldn't cancel a book with an all black team. But we're going to see that those two things are intricately connected. And just as an aside, this cover is fake news. This fight never occurs in the comic, although it's like weirdly referenced. So this is by the same, some of the same people who make the Black Panther main series. So Ta-Nehisi Coates is one of the co-writers with Yona Harvey, who I haven't heard of. I read a couple issues of the new Black Panther. I just quit. I had some issues with it, but this is a review. I'm going to review this as its own thing. And although there is the aspect is they just thought the success of that would just glom right onto here. But quite frankly, I think most of the success, and again, it had a big issue one and first couple of issues, but it's settling down. It was mainly Brian Stelfreeze coming back as artist, I think, more than anything else. It certainly wasn't the story or Ta-Nehisi Coates. So we get this. So we get a comic. Mind you, this is only issue 2. So here's the first page, and it basically describes what Black Panther and the crew is. And it says, the crew is a team of superheroes that has come together specifically to deal with problems that afflict the communities they come from or have come to be allied with. So my question is, how is that different than any other superhero team? Especially since we get into that one of these is effectively an adopted community. So when you how does this not describe the Avengers, who before the Avengers was every superhero, it was considered an exclusive group. So they only wanted the best, and for decades, Spider-Man was just turned away. He wasn't good enough to be an Avenger. Now everyone's an Avenger. So they're trying to almost say no, we don't have this segregationist idea of having an all-black team, which is kind of weird. It's from their communities. Apparently their communities are all black too. And we'll even get into the whole thing about Harlem, Harlem is a bunch of sales guys right now. It's not the black capital of America anymore. So then after we get one page of describing the book, then we get another page of credits, then we get an ad, and then we got, oh boy, that is exciting. That's just several different shades of brown and tan. We just got brown and tan and some traced photographs. Boy, oh boy, this is just excitement coming off the page. So this is a civil rights leader 50 years ago meeting some other people to set up a story. So this is where the fake news comes from. One person might be connected to Wakanda, and while he's asking, have you heard of Wakanda, he shows a picture. So that's what that comes from. Just someone just showing a picture. It's not even an actual fight. Here's where it gets, oh, now, boy, look, it's just muddy as hell. So here, this is, and they don't really introduce it very well. So I had to do process of elimination with this one. So we got Misty Knight and Storm, and they're on a team because they're both black. That's literally the reason this team exists. To black people, to save black communities, except for, that doesn't make any sense because there's no exclusively black communities, especially not Harlem and any time. So now they're in Brooklyn, and this is what Storm says. Now, mind you, this is the beginning of the scene. I see the mayonnaise shops have not yet arrived here. To which Misty does not say, what is your problem? Or why are you talking like that? She says, you think? Because, I don't know, I guess it's like a gentrification joke. Like, oh, those white people, they love mayonnaise and they are always coming into distressed areas and sweeping and painting over graffiti. Gosh darn it. But it also becomes a thing is would Storm ever say this? Storm would never, okay, this is just a weird, It's not even a very good joke. It's not set up very well. Like, you have to know a couple things to even get it. And it's not that funny. It's just like, haha, white people mayonnaise. That's still racist. Even low-key racist is still racist. And Storm's never been a hint of racist. She's very much about, feeling at home in all places. Obviously, her African home speaks to her, as, all homes speak to the people from them. But she was never like this guy, like, the best you can say is it's just a bad, low-key racist joke, but it doesn't fit her at all. But it's just, this is SJW writing. This is the type of joke that the writer would make. So we put it in Storm's mouth because that's what he thinks about when he thinks about gentrification. Haha, white people, mayonnaise. So they go and they get into like a really just kind of like weird, sad, it's very like depressed. So here's another background. They set up what the crew is, and then you don't ever really see the entire crew. You don't see Luke Cage in this whole comic. You see Black Panther on the very last page. Manifold is not even referenced at all. So if they're maybe building the team, that's fine, but you need to say we're building the team. Like, you don't really get any explanation of anything. So then they're like tracking down, there was a civil rights leader who was killed in police custody. They're trying to get some information on him. And so basically they're acting like cops, which is pretty weird. And then Storm doesn't act like herself. Storm's an expert hand-to-hand combatant, but she just causes like a wood shrapnel explosion of broken bottles in a closed space. Luckily, everyone's okay because she was just trying to give information. I didn't realize Storm was the Punisher. Storm is not Storm. Storm is, as all SJWs, they don't care about the characters. They don't know them. So Storm is basically generic angry black woman. That's what she is. And she's no different than Misty Knight in that regard. So they do this thing where they flash back again. Just like in America, they flash back to the 80s version of the X-Men because, again, these writers have not had any interest in the X-Men since they were in the, grade school or younger in the 80s. So that they can't reference the comics from 10 years ago or 20 years ago. They didn't read them. So they give a reference to the time when the X-Men were presumed dead and operating out of Australia. Except for Storm gives this really weird alternate version of it where she basically says they were hiding and they were just doing like strike missions just to kill their enemies. They were doing a variety of adventures and going to the Savage Land and just doing Claremont era X-Men stuff. They were just trying to lay low because, I actually forget the specific reason they were pretending to be dead, but I know it wasn't this. So her shtick is that, unbeknownst to everyone, she was actually going back to Harlem all the time because her dad was from Harlem, and Harlem is her legacy. So we're going to play around with time right here. The Harlem that exists in this comic and existed in the Luke Cage TV show, it only really existed in real life from, up until like the 90s. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a bunch of bankers. It's a bunch of guys who work in HR. It's basically a nice neighborhood with some. It's up and coming, but it's not this like Sesame Street, Fat Albert like fantasy land they make it out to be. And it wasn't even in real time in the comics. This era, which happened in the 80s, would have happened about 5 years ago. So it doesn't make any sense. Storm is not supposed to be like in her 60s. This wasn't her in her 30s 30 years ago. This is in comic book time about 5 years ago. And you play a little loosey-goosey with the styles and stuff. But again, does this remind you of any version of Storm you've ever known? It just makes me think of Lauryn Hill. So then we get some that apparently she was like real popular in the neighborhood and everyone knew her even though she didn't live there. And then she was friends with people even though she would just kind of occasionally visit. There's some kind of a good like L train scene right here, but it kind of comes out of nowhere. Then just to show him how rough it is, Misty Knight goes to her $3,000 a month apartment, and we get some really cool, incredibly depressing and sad. Okay, so they mention the AmeriCops, which are not mentioned here. They're not mentioned when they're recapping. There's only been one other issue. And the only reason I know about the AmeriCops is because they were mentioned in the articles that were pro and against this thing being canceled at issue 2. So they mentioned the AmeriCops, but we haven't seen them. They traveled all over and we haven't seen them. So then we get this, the city's trying to kill me because I'm black. The city's kind of trying to kill me because I'm a mutant. Well, try being a black and a mutant. And then she's like, oh, don't give me that intersectional privilege crap. This is Harlem, not Harvard. It's not any version of real Harlem. It's like fantasy 1970s TV show Harlem. And look at these faces. Adventure. This is like 2 roommates who got fired on the same day, and they're like, we got 6 months left on this lease. What are we going to do? Look how depressing and sad this is. Also, when did she get... I thought she just had like a hand. Anyway, so Storm's got to cover up the only thing you know her for, which is her white hair. And then she's got to go be a really very sad black woman. And then she gets this thing where she goes around, she meets some very cliche characters out of like a Oscar-winning movie about civil rights. And then, then we finally get to meet the guy who's actually the title. This is a really good drawing of the Black Panther. It's dark, because he's Black Panther, but it's really, really well drawn. And the thing is, when I flip through it, I do this weird thing where I flip from the back. So I saw this, I go, wow, this art's really good. And I'm like, all right, cool, I'm going to see this. It was basically an experiment. Like, how does a book get canceled on issue 2? So let's just review how a book gets canceled on issue 2. Number 1, you spin off of the popularity of something whose popularity hasn't been solidified. People like the Black Panther. Many people love him, but he's had a very checkered history. He comes and he goes, and one of the issues with him is that he's kind of too perfect. So he's kind of good at everything, and he's very stalwart. He's a little stolid in that regard. So he comes and goes. Every 10 years he makes a comeback. He made a comeback. This Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's not a good writer. He's got this weird baggage, and he's just boring. He is more of a writer than Gabby Rivera, who's just not a writer at all. It was like a homework assignment. She didn't care about getting the grade. But this is just boring. We start with 2 pages of intro, and yet they don't even properly intro the whole AmeriCops thing that was mentioned in every single article about this comic. Then we get the fake news cover. It's also just a bad cover. Like, this is cool. Make that the whole thing. Since I could not see white hair, I didn't even know this was Storm. I thought it was one of the supporting characters from the Black Panther. Black Panther has this issue. One of the reasons I got out of it, besides there was a couple good bits, but it introed way too many characters. That's one of the another things that non-comics writers do. They kind of think it's like a TV show. Even a really good comic artist is not good at making faces different. So you almost have to like memorize hairstyles. I mean, like in this first scene, like I could not tell. I had to keep going back. It's like, it's the guy with glasses. And then like, Powell. Who's Powell? Where's Powell? Powell's this guy. And it literally was like this boring exercise and process of elimination. And then just like, God, they're so miserable. There's nothing exciting. Superheroes are exciting. I remember in the Claremont John Byrne era, they had Storm go do stuff like this, but she was still Storm. She was still vibrant. Storm is a very vibrant person. She's always changing, but she is not this depressed, like, I don't know, Lauryn Hill type. This is not Storm. That's Lauryn Hill. This is not Storm. This is a generic character from like an Oscar bait civil rights movie. That's Storm right there. Look at this. It's 2 pages. And the only part that, like that, just look at her body language and her attitude. That's Storm. This is not. This is just And then, okay, look at, oh, wow. Jeez. It's like, this is like a comic book like that would be paid for by the city that would teach you about like reporting your landlord for not fixing your radiator. But sorry. So it was. I read this out of curiosity. I was like, how does a book get canceled that fast? And it's almost a question of like, how did this even get approved in the first place? There was not enough popularity for a spinoff. The crew has already failed. Actually, the whole point about like it being kind of backwards and segregationist to have an all black superhero team, I actually assume that there's really not. I mean, I've never heard them say we only accept black members. So it's quite possible that if you all have a connection to, a certain city, that part was not an issue. It was just a really boring comic made by people who don't really know comics very well. And I have a friend who writes comics, and he's like, you got to respect not only the audience's time and the audience's money. I hope my review was funny because this comic is not worth 16 minutes of your life. So tell me about what you think about this video. Tell me if you think there's a point where I just shouldn't review a bad comic because it doesn't even deserve the time. So leave comments, subscribe. I respond to comments, and I'll have another video up tomorrow. Thanks.